Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, we'll look back at 10 years of Patch Tuesday, then the shutdown of Silkroad and Lavabit, plus a big batch of your questions, our answers, and much, much more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 130 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly Systems Network and Administration podcast. We streamed this episode live on October 3rd, 2013. This episode's brought to you by our two fine sponsors, GoDaddy.com and Ting.com. I'll tell you more about those sponsors as the show goes on. And the live stream is powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at ScaleEngine.com. You got to go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Allan Jude. Hey there, Allan.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hey, Allan, welcome back.
You know how awesome it is if Chris's voice goes up into the girly range.
the girly octave? It is. That's how cool Scale Engine is. I should know because I stream everything from Scale Engine. I store everything on Scale Engine. My website runs on Scale Engine. So I know a little thing or two about it, Allan. I'm just saying.
Yep.
I can tell. I can testify. So we were off last week, although we had recorded a show for you, because you were out at a fancy BSD convention. Now you're all back. How did it go?
Yes. It was amazing, as usual.
Yeah, yeah.
This was the first one I've been to that wasn't at a university. It was actually like at a conference center. It's a little fancier. I think most people are fine with the university thing, but it was nice.
You guys scored a ton of interviews for BSD Now.
Oh, yes. We recorded 9 interviews, although one of them didn't work.
Well, that happens.
But we still got Kirk McCusick, Theo DeRat, Jordan Hubbard, Paul Henningkamp, who invented Varnish and jails and things like that.
Okay.
Baptiste Toussaint, the guy that did Package NG. Igor Sasyov, the guy that did Nginx.
Wow.
Scott Long from Netflix, but also was the FreeBSD release engineer for like 6 years. Wrote a lot of the boot menus and stuff.
And what was the name of the gentleman that was in this week's episode of BSD?
This week was Kirk McCusick.
Dr. Kirk McCusick.
Dr. Marshall Kirk McCusick. Right. So when he was in school, he shared an office with Bill Joy, who invented BSD. Oh. So he was there since literally the beginning.
Inception, yeah. Wow. Yes.
And he wrote UFS, the file system, and a bunch of other stuff. And in that interview, we learned some very interesting things about UFS.
Oh, really?
UFS is built of 2 different parts. There's the implementation, which actually takes care of putting the blocks in the right place on disk and making sure you can read them back and everything, right? And then there's a policy part that decides what's the best way to do it to get best speed or less fragmentation and all that kind of thing. So the policy part gets lots of love all the time. As drives change, drives work differently. They have different characteristics.
Right.
They added some stuff for SSDs to perform better there. But the implementation part has not changed since 1982.
See, this is what I'm talking about. When people talk about ButterFS, that is rock solid. That is 32 years of like provability, right? That is a track record that you can count on.
Exactly. It's just, and he said one time, I think it was like somewhere in the 2000s, there was this one thing they were trying to do, and they thought, well, the policy will work better if we add this little bit to the implementation. And they tested it, and it munched the file system. And it was like, nope, never mind. I should have known better. Let's just roll it back. Don't touch it.
Leave it. Well, that sounds good. And
the best comment was actually the one that he purposely waited till we stopped recording to make. In the interview, he talked a little bit about RiserFS and how it kind of got this reputation for eating your files.
Yeah.
So even that later on, once it became stable, nobody trusted it because it had got this reputation for being bad. So even once all the problems were fixed, nobody trusted it.
Right.
And then his offhand comment was, write a bad file system, go to jail.
Ouch! Ba-dum-bump. Well, so literally just as the show started, episode 5 of BSD Now just finished encoding. So it should be out pretty soon on the Jupiter Broadcasting site and bsdnow.tv.
Are you able to Kirk talks a bit quiet, and
yeah, I work my magic. I got skills. It's never, when you start kind of with the bad source, it's not perfect. So hopefully people will be forgiving. But the information is so worth it.
Yes. I didn't realize that snowball mic was so quiet.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
I hate snowball mics. It's funny because I just had the
Honestly,
conversation.
I just bought it because when I went to the computer store to I was actually looking for like the news reporter kind.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that when I was doing the interview, so the snowball was the thing of the options they had at the computer store. Like the day before I was leaving for BSD Can in the spring, the snowball was the one that was cheap enough that it didn't matter so much if it got broken in my luggage.
Oh yeah.
And was like, not a fragile shape or anything. It just has a little tripod.
I own 2 of them, and I've given away a third. So, I've bought plenty of them, but, yeah. It's funny that you say that.
And that's the blue, not the original one?
Right. Yeah. I talked to Matt just the other day about it. He went out and got a snowball mic for Linux Unplugged. It's like, oh, no. You see, I don't like those mics at all.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it sounds good. I'm like, no, trust me, it doesn't. But
mine's got like the 3 settings on the back, but I didn't bring the manual with me, and I didn't know which one was which.
It works, though, because the snowball mic is pretty good if you want to have 2 or 3 people get picked up at once, which is literally what you want to have when you guys are sitting around having a casual conversation. So it worked out really well for that scenario.
I couldn't jack the volume up.
Yeah.
Like, the input on Windows was at like 95%, and even with the plus 6 decibels out of Wirecast, it was.
That's all right. In post production,
really
I have more flexibility, so I was able to bring.
Yes.
It up. Yeah.
The one that'll be a little iffy is the Jordan Hubbard one. The idiots from the hotel are like moving chairs in the room behind us.
So you've been warned. But
crashing and banging every once in a while.
Honestly, that's just how on location at con interviews go. It's just like you sit down where you can.
We were lucky enough to find any quiet place at all.
Oh yeah.
The worst part was where we recorded the first 4 interviews. First two interviews was upstairs where the conference was. But on the first 2 days, it was the Developer Summit, and we were on the second floor of the hotel. And then on Saturday and Sunday, the conference was on the 3rd floor. So the first interviews we recorded were on the 3rd floor because nobody was there. But then the other days when the conference started, we recorded on the 2nd floor because that's where nobody was. But the building management system at this hotel turns the air conditioning off to that section if nobody's using it. So
it's starting to get warm?
Yeah, on the first day, we're like, oh, we'll use the Porto Mesa suite up on the 3rd floor because nobody's there. And we go in, and after like 10 minutes, you're just like... It's Malta, so it's not just the fact that it was 30 degrees Celsius, it's like 99% humidity.
Oh, that's a rough combo.
Like I had a marina view room. The hotel basically looks out on the water.
Nice.
Yes. I have some very nice pictures.
But the BSDCon shenanigans are not over, right? There's a VBSDCon coming up soon.
Another conference, this one in the States, so that, all the people from over here can get together, because, the one in Europe, a couple of people like me and Chris made it out, but most people couldn't make it to Europe.
Yeah, this one's in Virginia.
Yes, so this is a nice East Coast one, because last year the one in the States was on the West Coast, so this year we get East Coast, which is nice if you're from the East Coast. VBSDCon is October
25th through the 27th.
Yeah. Friday night, there's a welcome dinner and everybody gets situated, whatever. And then all day Saturday and Sunday are conference. And it's a hybrid unconference. So there's some lectures, but like talks, kind of like at your BSDCon and BSDCan. And then they also mix in lightning talks and the group stuff, and it's a little more social. I really like that type of conference.
Yeah,
it's like, don't get me wrong, I loved your BSDCon, but at your BSDCon there were 4 tracks.
Yeah.
So that's 4 talk going on at once, and you can only be in one place.
Right. Yep.
And there was almost like no free. Like I had to skip talks to record these interviews, and had to find a time when the person I was trying to interview didn't want to be in one of the talks.
Wasn't either doing a talk or attending.
Yep. And when there's 3 or 4 of them at once, there wasn't ever a time where there wasn't a talk I would have liked to have seen.
Yeah. Well, that's a sign of like a good conference, but also very hard, especially when you're trying to do like a little media production too. So
and then at Euro, we also had organized dinners. So, there was a little bit of time, and then everybody meet up front of the hotel, and we load up into 3 or 4 or 5 buses and go somewhere.
Oh, man, they bust you to the food? Oh.
But yeah, well, because some of the places were like 30 minutes away.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think we had dinner on each of the 4 different sides of the island.
As a non-drinker, Alan, you're totally missing out on an opportunity to be completely sloshed and get just driven around everywhere. Of course, you might miss out on some of the good conversation.
But yeah, we on Saturday we had a buffet on the beach.
Oh.
It's quite nice.
Yeah, I bet. Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, it's got to be a little hard to be back.
Thursday we ate on a pirate ship.
Are you serious? Did you get
steak.
pictures?
I didn't have pictures of that.
Oh, man, Alan. That sounds cool.
And then, where did we go Friday? Oh, Friday we had ribs along the beach.
Now you're just making me hungry, man.
It was a harbor.
I haven't even had lunch yet.
But yeah, it was a great time. But VBSDCon will be nice. There's a little more group stuff. So you get to meet more people.
Yeah.
When I did Meet BSD last year, I noticed that it was like 11 days after I got back from Euro. So I had just been there and spent the 2 days doing all the stuff.
Yeah.
But with MeetBSD, it was, the same 2 days, but I think I met 4 times as many people. Because it was this more social thing, right? Like in the lightning talks, you get broke up into groups of like 5 or 6 people, and so you get to know those people a little better.
Do you feel like long-term that's more valuable than...
I think so.
Yeah.
It's just, there's a lot more... with the regular talks, it's everybody get in the room, sit down, be quiet so the speaker can talk.
Right.
And then, after, you get the hallway track or whatever, the 15 minutes while everybody's trying to get a coffee and a cookie, you can get some talking done.
Yeah,
or
in between.
Over dinner.
Yeah.
But even at dinner, you're at a table, you get to speak to a couple of people, but you're at that table from, 7 till 10, and then you...
Well, and everybody else has been waiting till dinner to talk. So it's like...
Right.
Yeah.
And so, with the unconference style, you get to talk to more people, I think.
Yeah.
And it was really cool.
So,
and some of the best projects in BSD have come out of these conferences. Beehive, for example. It's that the whole idea to do that came out of one of these unconferences, I think, in 2010.
Oh, wow. So VBSD is the next one if you guys want to catch it and you want to see what Alan's been talking about. You can go to vbsdcon.com to get more info. Alan, we have a big show today.
We do.
We have coming up. In fact, we have a huge. Even our roundup is ridiculously big. We're going to get to the
roundup is always ridiculous.
I know it is. Just it's a full-fledged size part of the show now.
All the stuff I didn't have time to turn into full stories.
And I can't wait to talk about. We've got the Silk Road story in there. I read the I guess it's called a warrant, whatever was published, the PDF that was published that kind of like went through.
The Lavabit one was more interesting to me.
Yeah, the Lavabit one too is extremely interesting, and I'm curious about what you think about the ramifications of that, so we're going to get to that. But we also have some of the big stories we're going to get through. But first, before we do that, we have to celebrate a moment. We have to reflect on a decade of Patch Tuesdays, Alan. I think this is a big moment out there. Here we are. It started in 2003. 2013 has hit, which marks the 10-year window of... I can't believe 10 years of Patch Tuesday already. That blows my mind.
Yeah, so Microsoft announced the whole idea of Patch Tuesday on October 9th, 2003. And it said that with this, we'll improve patch management process, policies, and technologies to help customers stay up to date and secure. Start a global education program to provide better guidance and tools for securing your systems. And they said, our goal is simple. Get our customers secure and keep them secure. Our commitment is to protect our customers from the growing wave of criminal attacks. And, especially back in 2000, 2003, nobody wanted to admit that there was such thing as security vulnerabilities in software, right?
Right, and this is XP's heyday, too. So, and XP was pretty vulnerable.
Well, this is just starting XP, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just, getting past the, Windows 8, or Windows 98 had this, only later did it kind of get this idea of updates via the internet.
Right.
You remember, like, with Windows NT, when you got a service pack, it came on a CD.
Yeah, yeah. And then later they offered it for download, which they intended you to download the network install and store on your local file server, because there's no way you would download that 300 megabyte service pack on every computer. That'd be ridiculous.
That would be ridiculous. But, and Microsoft, even if you're not a big fan of Microsoft, you have to admit that they kind of laid the groundwork when they started blogging about security issues and had, serious communication campaigns to educate users about problems and to actually make connections with the security community.
I might even argue it goes a bit deeper in two senses. Number one, I believe this was one of the really not early. This is one of the clear indicators that Microsoft was saying, we're an enterprise company. We think in enterprise terms. We think in, enterprises need time to test, validate, and deploy. So, I think this was a huge turning point for Microsoft in that regard. But the other thing that strikes me about it, it was kind of like what you just touched on in the opening of this, is it was a sort of like Microsoft admitting, you know what? Security is just going to be an ongoing thing, and we're just going to do it every single month. Because back then, it was release patches as needed. And they just started to become needing all the time. And then so they would, you'd have a patch released on a Monday, and then on Friday, another patch would be released. And it was very hard to manage. So it was sort of two acknowledgments. It was Microsoft acknowledging, hey, A, we're an enterprise company, and hey, B, vulnerabilities happen, and we're just going to have to
I think especially the enterprise thing is moving away from this model that Microsoft was for home and going into the enterprise. And just having it be more consistent. Because one of the other things was the Microsoft Security Bulletins format, the way the text is laid out, being the same every time, just made it, and having sections made it much easier to get the information you wanted without having to read paragraphs and paragraphs of text.
Right, very true.
You could just extract, all right.
You learned how to parse it once.
This block explains what products are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Are any of my products on that list? Yes. Okay. Here's the mitigations I can do until I can install this. Here's what it fixes. Here's what the problem might be. And I think formalizing a lot of that made a big difference.
It is really actually a pretty good system. And I think what's kind of ironic about it is I was a bit of a jackass when they launched it, because back then, I ran Gentoo. And to me, the idea of waiting a month to have my bank systems vulnerable for a month was absolutely...
Well, a month would be a worst case, but...
Yeah, right. Yeah, of course. But of course I went worst case.
and there are times when they do it sooner than the patch Tuesday.
Yeah. Of course, now I look back at it and go, that seems like such an obvious thing that they did. Like, I shouldn't have been a naysayer, because it obviously has worked out. But I am kind of amazed that it's been 10 years already. Time flies when you're quasi having fun, Allan.
And in general, because of all of this now, public disclosures of serious Microsoft security holes are now the exception instead of the rule. People report them to Microsoft and get a patch done, and it's all nice and responsible disclosure.
Yeah. Changed that in a big way, didn't it?
Yeah.
Hadn't even thought of that aspect of it. As back then, people used to release stuff publicly just to get Microsoft to move, because they didn't have any formal process internally, and so different departments would have different ways of responding. So you could have a SQL error.
And in general, Microsoft was just bad about just not responding at all.
Well, yeah.
And so...
Well, and even if the Windows team was good about a patch, the SQL team might have been horrible.
Exactly. And the important thing was to create that communications and to actually respond to researchers. Because we've seen lots of publicly disclosed stuff where it was Sony or some other company where the researchers tried hard to get in touch with someone and were just ignored repeatedly. And then they were like, well, we have no choice but to publicly announce it.
Yeah, I mean, we got to get you to do something.
There were all these companies that have no formal procedure for a way for security researchers to actually get in touch with the people they need.
That's pretty interesting. Pretty interesting to look back at that now. And honestly, and as we move forward in the rest of the show, it is security vulnerabilities and patching your S are as absolutely important today as they were back in 2003 and 2002, if not more so. But these days, honestly, I worry more about compromises in the technology itself, or the federal government just getting SSL keys, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my mindset now has shifted away from, well, what I need to do to be safe is have a good firewall and maintain my patches, to I have to fundamentally think about, can I trust the technology I'm implementing? Can I trust the creators? Can I audit the source? And it's this whole new world. But it'd be kind of awkward. We'd be in a weird place if Microsoft had never done this. I think they would have probably... I don't think they would have been able to be a serious enterprise contender if they hadn't done this, because they were starting to get a lot of heat back then.
Yeah. I don't know what we would have done. Probably just gone with it, and we'd be worse off than we are now. And, right now we're not that well off.
Yeah. It's only as good as it is because of some of that stuff they didn't. Do you feel like it had any trickle-down effects on like BSD projects or other?
Open source projects have long had, procedures for this. Like, I don't know about some of the Linuxes, but FreeBSD has a security officer that has very specific duties, and there's a whole system for everything.
Yeah. They didn't really change their approach based on any of this stuff?
No, the approach has been defined since before 2000. Right.
You kids and your new play operating systems, your new toy operating systems. That's what the mainframe guy that I used to work with called XP was the Fisher-Price operating system when I took it because
it actually kind of I called it that too, but mostly just because of the colors.
Right. Oh yeah. And he said you could run your Fisher-Price OS on your Mattel Inside computer because he was a System 390 guy. Yeah. Meanwhile, when he had to have something fixed, the IBM representative had to come out at $300 an hour. So whatever. Whose system's still around now, right? Anyways. Well, any other thoughts on that one, Alan?
No, that's about it for that one.
All right. Well, then I want to thank our first sponsor this week, and that, my friends, is Ting.com. Now, Ting is mobile that makes sense. I'm a happy Ting subscriber since, I don't know, the beginning of the year. And I've got right now the HTC One. I'll be honest, I might have been eyeing the Moto X or maybe even another phone that is coming out, the Note 3. The Note 3. But that's something you need to think about later. What you need to think about first when I'm talking about Ting is my favorite part. No contracts, no early termination fees, truly and completely contract-free. I love that. The average Ting price is $21 a month. There's no bundling of ride-along services, so you're not going to get something unexpected. There's no overage penalties because you only pay for what you use. You have a flat $6 a month to get the line, and then you only pay for the minutes. There's no add-on charges for voicemail, caller ID, tethering, hotspot, three-way calling, call forwarding, and other features that you would just expect because you know how the technology works. You know they don't have to have like some sort of specialized server farm so that way you can have tethering. It's not like it's a reoccurring cost to them. In fact, Ting often just considers themselves to be a mobile ISP. They love it when you use data. And that's one of the great things about Ting is you can really use the service however you want. So go over to techsnap.ting.com. When you go there, that landing page will flag you to take $25 off your first device or $25 off your monthly plan or your first month's plan if you have a device you're going to bring. They've got all that outlined on their site. They've got a really good site. Makes it super easy. You can drill down into the forums. You can get information you want. You can get in the discussion groups. And you also can call them at 1-855-TING-FTW, and a real person answers the phone. They've also got a blog that they update sometimes a couple times a week. Now, for some of you parents out there, you might have seen this. If you haven't, I want to direct your attention over to the Ting blog. They outline a few ways that parents can help keep Android a little more kid-friendly, I guess you might say. You know, things like the ads maybe don't pop up websites and stuff like that. So they've outlined some great tips for parents. And this is one of the things I love about Ting is they really get people. In fact, Alan, as a fellow Canadian, you might appreciate this. Ting did a frequently asked questions about Ting and the government shutdown and how the government shutdown doesn't affect Ting customers. I felt like the Canadians might have been having a poke, but like one that is totally deserved. And that's just, you know, Ting has got a great corporate culture. That's one of the things I love about them. But they also have an interesting approach to devices. So they've got new and used devices. New devices and used devices are both contract-free. You buy them, you own that device up front. You own that device. Think about that. That is a completely different approach than what traditional cell phone providers do. They also have fantastic used devices. This lets you get into Ting at a great price. So like I just mentioned, Ting has unlimited phones on any plan with shared pooled minutes. Maybe you want to get yourself something real fancy like the new Moto X or the HTC One or the LG Optimus F3 Titanium, which is only $230 for a nice dual-core Android phone with no contract. I love that. And then maybe somebody else in the family or in your small business doesn't need a full-fledged smartphone. Ting's got a great bunch of devices, including a personal shopper service. And one of the things I love about Ting is that they have a very straightforward dashboard. You go onto the Ting site, and you can easily, within a glance, get an idea of how to manage your account, what your minute usage is at, how many megabytes you've used. You can go in there and set alerts to see if, you know, hey, if I start getting down to like 4 gigs, send me a message. That way I know. And they'll do a push notification to the Ting Android app. Yeah, they have an Android app, and it's really great for managing your account there, too. And that no-hold customer support is fantastic if you got a few people on your line, on your, you know, maybe like some friends, family, or in my case, the mom. You never know. You never know what your situation is. It'd also be great for a small business team. And with no mysterious line items on the bill, unlimited devices, powerful online control panel, and a no-hold customer support. Those are just a few of the things I love about Ting. Go over to TechSNAP.ting.com, take $25 off your first device or the first month, and get started and see what you can do. You know, if I was going to make a recommendation, if you go over at the used section, and if you wanted to, I don't know, improve the wireless service in your house, they've got the Sprint Airwave there for $120, and they'll take the $25 off when you go to TechSNAP.ting.com. They've also got the Samsung Nexus S. Alan, is that your phone, the Nexus S?
No, I have...
Maybe it is.
I have the Nexus S, but not the Samsung. Mine's the Google one.
Right, well, Samsung makes it. Manufactures it for Google.
No, the one I have, I think, is an LG, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the one that I've been recommending to people recently, I think Galaxy S3. So the Galaxy S3 is a really, really good Android phone. You can get it for $385 from Ting, off contract, with no early termination, and you're only going to pay for what you want. Think about that. That is a fantastic deal. That is a really great deal.
Plus, a lot of people see, oh, well, the phone costs more. It's like, yeah, but if you look at just what you're going to pay a regular phone company in the first year of the 3-year contract, it's much cheaper to buy the phone and use Ting than it is.
Especially if you have a month where for some reason you didn't use minutes, or you have one month where you needed a lot more minutes. Like my brother, his wife, I think they're married. She's in labor right now as we're recording. You know, so they're going to use more minutes this month, right? And if they're on Ting, they don't have to worry about it. They'll just pay for what they use because Ting adds up your minutes, your megabytes, and your messages at the end of the month, and whatever bucket you fall into, that's what Ting charges you. Plus, Ting has rolled out an early termination relief program. So now, if you need to leave your current provider and you're still under contract, Ting has got a great system to help take out the sting of that early termination. You grab a device, you port your number, and then you submit your claim over to Ting, and they'll take up to $75 per device. They'll give you a credit of $75 to help ease that transition. And when you go to TechSNAP.ting.com, right in the middle of that page right there, they have a How Much Would You Save button. Click that. Plug your information into the calculator, consider that early termination relief program, and then really the math speaks for itself here. You get great service, you get a great deal, you get great phones, and you're supporting a fantastic company. I absolutely love it. So go to TechSNAP.ting.com, and thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. I have the HTC One, Alan, as you know. I have no justification for getting a new phone. I literally love Ting so much that I want another phone just so that way I can have more phones on Ting. It's true, too. I'm like, that Moto X looks really good. I don't have a reason for it, though.
Like, what's the roaming rate like?
I know, right?
Would it make more sense for me to buy a Ting phone from the States and just use it full-time in Canada?
Maybe. So Cheese Bacon in our chat room right now says that he's been with Ting for 6 months, and he says they're freaking awesome. You know, I get tons of notes from folks who say that they've switched to Ting and they love it. So it's great to hear from that. We had a thread started in the Linux Action Show subreddit just this week, too, where somebody's like, Ting is incredible! So go check it out. See what everybody's been talking about. Go to TechSNAP.ting.com. And again, thanks to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. All right, Alan. So we need to move on to our news because we have a lot to dig into. And I was noticing that Java Click-to-Play seems to be having a bad week. What's going on?
Right. So Java Click-to-Play is a system that is supposed to make it so that Java won't start up by itself. You have to click to allow it to run so that you can't get, drive-by exploits. But researchers have found 2 vulnerabilities that allow you to bypass Java Click-to-Play that are currently being exploited in the wild. So apparently a new variant of the core-ish cool exploit kit makes use of these 2 vulnerabilities, CVE 2013-2460 and 2472, and allows malicious JavaScript to exploit, malicious Java code, not JavaScript, to exploit Java version 7, update 21, and prior.
Oh.
Although nobody should be running Java 7, update 21, because that's from like the spring.
So all you
should be on
enterprises
Java
out there.
7, update 40. But as we saw from that graph we had a couple of months ago, most people are way behind.
I blame businesses.
A lot, yes, but also home users. They get partly Java gets updates fairly often sometimes, and users get really bored of click, click, wait, finish. But also, Oracle loves to shove McAfee or Ask.com toolbars into their installer.
Yes.
And so users, in an effort to avoid installing the crapware, don't install the update.
Yep. We've talked about that. That's a real problem. And they sort of, these vendors shoot themselves in the foot over it. I know. It's so frustrating.
Oracle needs a good fist pounder.
Yeah, for sure. For a lot of reasons, actually.
Interestingly, it seems that this vulnerability may have originally been discovered by VUPen, the researchers that sell the vulnerabilities to
the NSA.
Governments.
Yep.
Not just the NSA.
Right.
They sell them to each government branch separately for more money. So they sell it to the NSA and then separately sell it to the FBI and then separately sell it to the CIA and so on.
That does feel like the most effective way to use my tax dollars.
Yes. And yes, so at some undisclosed date they discovered this, and then in June, Oracle fixed it, and then in July, VUPen published their information since it was no longer of any value to the NSA. Interestingly, in order to beef up the security, since click-to-play obviously isn't working very well, in the latest version of Java, Update 40, Oracle has included a new system called the Deployment Rule Set. And it allows, in a corporate environment where you're centrally deploying your Java, you can, as part of the deployment, include a whitelist of sites. So you can blacklist all sites, like, set the default to block and then whitelist only certain sites. This way, if you're a corporation and you use Java, right? The reason Java is installed on every machine in the office is because your corporate such and such software uses Java, right? This is, why most places have Java in the first place, because everybody has some app that uses Java that they need to use.
Yeah.
So with this, they can blacklist everything and only whitelist their apps. So Java works for their apps, but can't be exploited by random drive-by website. So that's interesting, although it provides apparently no help for home users because they're not using that type of deployment. But browsers are moving towards that. Like Firefox automatically disables Java and makes you click a bunch of times to allow it to run if you're using a known vulnerable version of Java.
That's nice of them, I suppose.
Yep.
I guess it's not too surprising.
Yeah.
What is frustrating is the fact that these old versions sort of
are just out there and don't go away.
I guess this could
also,
be a...
I had quite a bit of trouble updating mine recently because I have like the 64-bit version, but then also the 32-bit version because the browser's 32-bit. And so you can end up having version 40, but your browser's still using version 25.
Oh.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting one.
I look at this and I think, I wonder if this isn't an argument in some regards, security-wise, for cloud computing. Because if Google finds a vulnerability or whatever in one of their cloud apps, then they just push out a new version to the web server and everybody gets it. There's no weird update lag. There's no, it has an installer.
If you're a Windows corporate network, you have, WSUS and you can do the same thing.
Yeah, if that was true, though, I think we'd see a lot less of these older versions of Java lingering.
Well, I think the reason the older versions of Java linger is because people are annoyed by the updates. Administrators don't want to spend the time installing the updates all the time. And because there's always these cases where the update means something doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, like Snakejaw points out in our chat room, it's pretty much no different than Python 2.7 hanging around for decades to come. I suppose you can look at it that way, too. I don't know. I feel like infrastructure stuff like Python or Nginx or Apache, if that falls behind, that is not the same as user land stuff that is sort of up to users that don't know any better to maintain it. Where, like you mentioned, home users who, maybe their OEM PC shipped with Java preloaded along with 10,000 other junkware apps, they never know what to do with it. They don't want to break their computer.
Yep.
Funny, because we just talked about Patch Tuesday, which was supported, which was, one of the intentions was to kind of remove some of the fear around patches to standardize and normalize. But Microsoft before then got a bad rep for some of these patches breaking things. I had servers that got broken by Microsoft updates.
Yep, they had one just like that just recently that we talked about.
Yeah, they
two
still
or 3
do.
weeks ago.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of stuff is what made people gun-shy about doing these updates?
Partly, I think most end users don't even know that happens.
Yeah, I feel like some of it trickles down into the consciousness. Like they're like, oh well, we can't do that because I've heard of bad things. I don't know.
But I think a lot of it is like just the fact that Windows Updates kind of does annoying things now. Like when you tell your computer shut off, and it's like, okay, but first I'm going to install these 25 updates.
Yeah,
and we're going to be very big warning, say don't turn off your computer while this is happening.
Oh, we know that you're on a laptop and you need to leave right now, but
yeah. And sometimes they're fairly good about not doing it when you're on battery, but sometimes they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, well, why don't we jump into our next story?
Actually, that happened to me. I was shutting off my media center machine that's in my living room.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually reboot very often. It goes to sleep when I stop using it, right?
Sure.
But I shut it off because I was leaving the country for a week.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And it's like installing 28 updates. And I was like,
Nothing broke, though, right?
No.
That's good.
I'm like trying to finish turning everything off at my house, and the machine won't turn off because it's installing updates, and it's like...
And then I'm like, as an Arch user, I'm like, yeah, updates, sweet! I was like, more new stuff! So I love updates.
Right, the free is the update,
yeah.
You know.
I don't like Windows updates.
Magic.
Yeah. I like updates that bring me new things, new features, new versions of programs. Updates that just fix stuff that I can't even tell was broken in the first place is very anticlimactic. All right, the Barclays... Now, last week, I think it was... I can't remember because we recorded 2 weeks back.
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, we talked about how these guys just rolled into a bank, hooked up an IP KVM, and were like, so long, thanks for all the fish, and then got remote access to the servers.
But somehow they got caught before they could steal any money.
Yeah.
But in this story that came out after that, Barclays, a different bank, same style of attack, except for the baddies made off with 1.3 million pounds, which, if I do the rough math, I think is about $2 million.
Oh. Using this KVM type approach.
Yes, it's over $2 million US.
That almost sounds worth it. Yep. You know what? That does sound worth it. So what happened?
So a person pretended to be an IT administrator, walked into the branch and installed an IP KVM connected to a little 3G router. Tiny devices, 3G, so that they can connect to it from anywhere. Uses the cell phone network instead of the Wi-Fi.
Oh.
And then later they took over that workstation when it was unlocked or whatever and managed to siphon out $2 million. Although Barclays claims that they've recovered a significant amount of the money. Their fraud detection system might have detected when this happened, and when you do a wire transfer, if the bank finds out it's fraudulent within the first 30 minutes or so, they can usually claw the money back pretty quick.
Yeah.
After that, because wire transfers are supposed to be deterministic, once the money's sent, you can't just claw it back usually.
Well, so I wonder, did you see any details on how they hooked the KVM up to a 3G network? Because I think that's pretty brilliant, not putting it on their LAN.
A regular KVM, right? IP KVM. So it's got a keyboard and video ports on the one side, right? And then it's got an Ethernet jack on the other side. Normally you plug this into a switch or whatever, and now you can connect to an IP address with a web browser and fire up a Java client and take over the machine.
Yeah.
Right? I use these all the time. They had that wired into a 3G router. So basically, regular off-the-shelf, right? It's got some LAN ports on it.
3G router with an Ethernet
it
port.
uses a SIM card. Right, yeah. So it's got Ethernet ports on one side and a SIM card on the other with an antenna. And now all of a sudden you have an IP address on the cell phone network that you can connect to and get to that IP KVM.
So that if you could track that SIM card down to its owner, you could maybe identify who it is. So what you need to do is buy your SIM cards with Bitcoin on Silk Road. Oh, wait. Silk Road shut down. Oh, wait.
You can buy pre-purchased ones anyway. You can pay a homeless person to walk into the store and buy it for you.
Hey, that's a brilliant idea, actually, Allan. Boy, you are dangerous. You are dangerous. So they got them.
I've watched too many spy movies. So, yes, anyway, with the fraud detection system and security cameras and other stuff, there are not really any specifics, but apparently they found the people. So the police raided a number of properties to arrest the perpetrators, and they found thousands of fake credit cards, other personal data about people, drugs, jewelry, cash. This was actually part of an organized criminal gang that was doing other things as well as stealing money from banks. They were also into identity theft and things like that.
Basically taking advantage of the new enterprise opportunities available to them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting.
And also, apparently this is not the first time that the Barclays Bank has been hit. They say they've been working closely with the Metropolitan Police's e-crimes unit since the security breach at their Swiss Cottage branch back in April. And they say they identified the fraud and acted swiftly to recover the funds the same day they were stolen.
Huh. And you say this happened while you were at EuroBSDCon, huh? But you have an alibi,
this
right?
This one in the UK?
You have an alibi for that?
I don't know if it was while I was gone or not. I think it happened before I left.
No, that's good. Just pretend like you don't know. That's good. Okay.
Yeah,
What other thoughts on that story, Alan?
No.
Okay. Well, I want to thank our second sponsor this week, and that is GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy.com has this $1.99.com deal. I don't know how long this is going to be. They're rolling it out with their new image. They got the Jean-Claude Van Damme up there, who is, honestly, if you put Jean-Claude Van Damme on something, or Sylvester Stallone, or, well, yeah, basically those two guys, or definitely Die Hard, what's his name? Bruce Willis. Those guys, all those guys I love. But Jean-Claude, he's got a special part in my heart, and right now he's kicking you in the face. He's kicking it up a notch over at GoDaddy.com. If you use the code TECH199 when you check out, TECH199 when you check out, you'll get your .com for $1.99. Now, I don't have to tell you, there's a lot of other amazing features over at GoDaddy.com, a lot of services, a lot of products, several of which the Jupiter Broadcasting crew uses, including the domain management, the CDN stuff, the mirrors, the Linux servers, all of that. In fact, we got an email this week from somebody who's just recently transferred all of their domains over to GoDaddy.com, and they've been exceptionally happy with the service. And now is a better time than ever. So if you use the code TECH199 when you check out, you'll get the first .com for $1.99. That's not. I'm not making a mistake. You will literally get a .com for $1.99. That is amazing. Additional .coms or additional years on that .com, $9.99. That is. I mean, like, if I was like, yeah, you got a .com for $9, that's a great deal. Yeah, it is. $1.99, though, that's an unheard of deal. I don't know how long these are going to be around, so go use the code TECH199.
Not long, so hurry up.
Yeah, I honestly thought maybe we'd be sitting down today and they might be done, but I haven't gotten word that they are, so I definitely want to encourage you to go take advantage of them while you can.
You might want to do that right now because they likely are not going to keep that going.
If you have, like, a mental fart and you can't remember what the TECH199 code, even though it's crazy simple and it's part of our show name, TechSNAP. But anyways, if you can't remember, we've got a banner in the show notes. You click that, totally pre-charges your shopping session with the $1.99 code. So thank you to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. Thanks to you guys for taking advantage of these incredible offers. And if you're working in a group, if you're in a small business, or even if you're just working by yourself, there is not a better domain name registrar out there. GoDaddy.com, world's #1 domain name registrar. And trust me, I've been using them for years. I've tried a lot of them. I always heartily recommend GoDaddy. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
I've moved many customers over to GoDaddy just to avoid all the problems you run into at other places.
Yeah, I have.
Like, I've seen some other places that have been horrible. Like, you know, if you want to unlock a domain to do a transfer to GoDaddy, you have to, like, email them and wait a week.
Or, like, fax them on corporate letterhead. Have you had to do that?
And yes, I had to do that once. So I made a fake corporate letterhead since the domain wasn't for a real business.
Oh, and I was a contractor, and I wasn't there.
That is.
Yeah, I know. It is ridiculous. It is these. I've had these clients. They go out there. They go into these hole-in-the-wall domain name registrars, and then they call me in there to fix some sort of problem, and the person who set it up is completely gone. The domain name company doesn't have any kind of support infrastructure, and it is a total nightmare, and especially when you're in a situation where an SSL cert is expired or a domain.com has expired and the site's down. I mean, it's it's very stressful for the company. It's very stressful for me as the IT contractor, and I've done the same thing where I went and created a fake freaking letterhead and put a letter on there and even signed it as them and sent it in because I wasn't even in the same state, and they needed it fixed immediately. And it's just the system that's ridiculous. And every single time I have moved those clients over to GoDaddy.com, and it has never been a problem since. I mean, it is seriously one of those things that, A, you don't need to hassle with, and B, when it becomes a problem, it is the hugest problem that company's ever had in their entire life, and they just totally flip out. So just avoid it all.
It's the foundation of the internet, right? It's DNS. You can't screw around.
And it's people's presence online, and when that crap is expired or they can't get access to it or whatever it is, some employee rage quits and they don't have access, you need a big company out there who has, well, the #1 domain name registrar out there. They're set up for this kind of stuff.
They're not just #1. They're bigger than the next 10 registrars all put together.
And there's a good reason for it. It didn't happen by accident.
Exactly.
They didn't just fall backwards into it. So, yeah, go over to GoDaddy and use that Tech 199 while you can. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the TechSNAP program.
Yep.
All right, Alan. Well, we've got some epic feedback. Okay. I should probably save this for the feedback segment, but I focused a little bit this week on the bit messages because I've been neglecting them. But you don't even have to know, Alan. You won't even know. I'll just slip them in there, and you don't have to worry about it, okay? Is that a deal?
I can probably tell some of them because the type of people that would use a bit message are going to ask a certain type of question.
You're probably right. Well, we'll find out. We'll see if you can tell in the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of our website, sending us a bit message, or starting a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. Now, I'll warn you up front, we got a lot of great emails this week, and I felt very, very guilty for not getting them all because we were off for 2 weeks. So we have a big collection, but I also had a backlog of bit messages I had to get through. So we slipped a few emails in, but mostly these are bit message or subreddit posts. Our first email, Alan, comes from Reg. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, Reg writes, he says, hello, I'm a big fan of all the Jupiter Broadcasting shows, and I recently became a sponsor of one of your shows.
Cool.
I wonder that. Interesting. I have two questions which are unrelated. Now, here's his first question, which I don't think in this show we have an answer for. I want to read it. Maybe we can get some answers by the time Last hits on Sunday. He says, I have a development workstation. I have a nice setup of 6 screens and an array of 3 across by 2 down. This is on an old 11.4 version of OpenSUSE. I've tried to upgrade, but no driver, either Linux native or proprietary, will seem to work in the new Linux OpenSUSE distro. My current setup is I can pan across all screens as if they were one big screen using GNOME 2 on OpenSUSE 11.4 with an AMD 5870 iFinity 6 display card with 6 ports. It's a monster. I wonder if that isn't his trouble right there. So I wonder if you could recommend a course of action to make a particular, if you think an alternative distro would give me a better chance of making it work under newer Linux versions. I've never really gone beyond 2 or 3 screens, so I don't know if I have an answer for that. I doubt.
Was it? I'm not a big Linux guy, so I don't know. But is it usual for features to suddenly just disappear?
Well, when you're talking AMD cards,
should you have to change? And how would changing distros make a difference for the video driver?
Possibly a newer version of X might make a difference.
I guess. I'm just used to in FreeBSD, X is a package. You just install that's separate.
I'm not sure.
It's not FreeBSD. It's just
I wonder
if X. You get it from package system and it's updated constantly.
The problem is we're in this state now where I have completely switched over to NVIDIA on all of my Linux systems. Actually, ironically, except for the one you're called in.
I've only bought NVIDIA stuff for the last couple of years because I was like, if I ever give up playing games, or now the podcasting gets in the way of this too, but it was like I could just run my desktop on FreeBSD all the time.
Yeah, I know what you mean there.
So I'm really looking forward to Beehive getting a little better. And my plan is to have a machine with 2 video cards and do hardware pass-through to send one of the video cards into the VM.
That's the dream.
And get full Windows, hardware virtualized, full performance.
I
have the whole video card, so I could play the game, but have the base OS. BBSD.
Oh my gosh.
So that even my Windows NTFS is on ZFS.
I got to tell you, this has been the one time I considered doing this is there is a company called Parallels. I don't remember what their name is, but they make the Parallels software. And for a little while, they had
got bought by somebody.
Yeah. But for a little while, they had this crazy expensive solution where if you bought an HP workstation with a specific type of graphics card and used the Parallels virtualization, you could then get pass-through virtualization for the graphics. And that is the promised land for me. And I've been watching the chat room to see if they had any suggestions, and there seems to be a couple in there. They say some people think that just switching the desktop environment might fix it, like switching to XFCE. Doubt it. But I'll punt this to the last, and we'll see if anybody has any answers, because I fantasize about having 6 screens, so I'd like to know. But here's the second part of this question, which I think we can help with, Alan. So I had a couple of servers available to the internet at home, and I'm moving one to a co-location facility. The server hosts websites and emails, so a more stable environment makes sense. The second server, while it serves websites and emails, is really my development server and therefore does not need to be connected to the outside world except when I need it to, such as showing a client an idea. And, you know, he's also a semi-IT guy, so sometimes he needs to throw something on there. My home internet service provider charges me about $155 a month for internet. Wow. As a business class service, it means getting a fixed IP and having a reverse DNS lookup working. I'm a consumer. If I use consumer class service, I cut that down to about $35.45 with better specs. So he can get better speeds if he goes consumer, but then he doesn't get static IP. And he's not sure what the service level will be. In any case, since I don't need to always be connected, I was thinking maybe connecting my home server directly to my co-located server through a VPN and using that connection to make my home server available to the internet when I wish it to be. My question is, what are the basics in the setup? What basics in the setup would you recommend to make this work? Or if you have an alternative suggestions to a VPN tunnel, I'm all ears. My best guess is to set up a fixed IP on my home server on the Ethernet card that I have connected directly to the internet. He says, I have Bind 9 running on both servers, which makes things nice for DNS. He goes on to say he's going to use OpenSUSE. He's been using OpenSUSE for many years. I became familiar with it, and the co-located server is a recent version of CentOS, which is his second Linux distro of choice. I'm going to be setting it up the first time, starting in about a week. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. So he wants to kind of have like a permanent connection to a co-located server.
Right. I've done things like that before, but you know, you can just open VPN or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, the server that's at your house connects out and connects to the server at the co-location, because the server at your house that way can be on a dynamic IP. You don't have to pay for a static IP anymore.
The chat room says, is there any advantage to a corporate ISP versus 3 domestic IPs for the same price? You know, it all comes down to what the ISP's policies are, really, too, because he was asking
mostly,
about that.
if you're paying for a business account, you're normally getting a service level agreement saying that it'll never be down more than this much, otherwise you get a refund. Or, you know, if it does go down, it'll be fixed within so many hours, or you get a refund. Well, whereas as a consumer, you get nothing.
The other thing to consider, too, is might not be as applicable to him if he's putting his server in a co-location, but a lot of times, if it's like, for example, my Fios internet, the consumer service has one range of IPs, and the business has a whole separate range of IPs. And I've been led to believe that the range of IPs that the business consumer's in are not tossed up in like those spam blacklists and stuff like that. So like, I'm more likely to have success running an email server.
Exactly. Most consumer-type ISPs will just block all the ports for even running a web server at home.
But even when they don't block it, a lot of times the dynamic IPs end up on black lists anyways.
Exactly, because they're in the range that makes it look like only spam would come from these.
I wanted to recommend, so I think what he needs to do is, you know, an OpenVPN client at his house, the OpenVPN server at the co-location. I think his theory there is good. However, I wanted to recommend, because we've also gotten a lot of emails about like representing yourself as in the US or another country. And Jupiter Broadcasting has a recent affiliate with ProXPN. If you use the code JBLive when you check out, you'll get 20% off the life of the ProXPN service. ProXPN has support for OpenVPN, and they also have like servers in like 22 different countries.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So you can just kind of pick and choose what country you want to represent yourself from. This is great for testing. This is great for blocking certain restrictions. This is great for avoiding tracking. So proxpn.com and use the code JBLive to get 20% off of their VPN service. They've been a sponsor on some other tech networks, and including Mr. Steve Gibson Security Now. He said he went through and he vetted it and seemed to think it was pretty good stuff. And I've used it on and off through testing, and it's pretty simple to get set up once you've got it. So this wouldn't necessarily solve Reg's problem, but if somebody else out there just needs a VPN solution, doesn't want to toss up their own. So
basically, if you want to solve the problem he has, but at the same time don't have a co-location, then, you know, if you get a dedicated IP with the VPN, then it would let you do it that way.
Yeah. Yep. So again, it was ProXPN, and you can use the code JBLive to get 20% off the entire life of your account, which seems like a pretty good deal. I signed up, and I've got it handy now. I've got it pre-charged on my HTC One, too. In fact, they also have an Android app that will take care of the VPN connections for you and then route some of the application data through that VPN, which is handy.
That could be useful.
Yeah. All right, we have our next question comes in from Quantum Boredom. He says, in regards to services like LastPass, TechSNAP and often other Jupiter Broadcasting shows present LastPass as a good approach to password storage and management. But what advantage does such a service have over systems where you generate a password using a set pattern each time, something like PBKDF2? Excuse me. Where static passwords in your password of choice, it does not change after different sites, but you could have more, blah, blah, blah. He goes on to say... Anyways, you know, I don't actually...
when you do something like that, if people figure out the static part of your password, and then they can guess the site name, then they can get all your passwords, right? The whole point of LastPass is each one is completely random. Whereas when you're doing something deterministic, which is just a hashing algorithm on the same secret for every site, and then like the site name, as we've talked about before, that's not, really a good thing.
Right. And so there's that aspect of it, the password generation. Then there's the storage. LastPass uses local encryption, then sends an encrypted file up to the LastPass servers. Then it syncs it across your mobile devices, your web browsers. And lastly, the thing that I like about it is when you work in a business, or maybe even like if you have a significant other, there's sometimes just shared services that you need to be able to log in as, like MailChimp, for example. Like maybe, I want Angela to be able to log in as admin to MailChimp, and I want to be able to log into admin as MailChimp. So instead of us having some sort of clunky password system, we just store that in LastPass, and then LastPass has a secure facility for sending a password to somebody else. But there's other options out there like KeyPass, and Gibson is working on Squirrel, which is going to kill the password supposedly. So there's a lot of different things in flux. I'm not saying you have to use LastPass, but use something. Use some sort of password management system. That way, every single site you use has its own unique password.
Yeah, KeyPass is interesting if you have your own server somewhere to store stuff on.
Yeah, or maybe like a sync, like a BitTorrent sync or Dropbox. I don't know. That seems like a good break.
Right. Whereas the KeyPass, the idea is use WebDAV or whatever to just push it to your shell account somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Just don't.
Which works great for me because I have lots of servers, but I understand.
Oh yeah. All right, Alex writes in with our first ZFS question of the week. Hey, Alan and Chris, love the show. Been watching since episode 4 and have not been able to stop. I have a question regarding ZFS and virtualization. I'm currently running ESXi5 VMware server at my house.
So I'm gone for 2 weeks, and you're back to saying ZFS.
Oh, you're right. Sorry. You're right. Sorry. You know what? It's all that dirty American upbringing of mine.
I know. I tried very hard to get Matt Aarons to say ZFS just once.
I feel like it's got more punch. I feel like Zed gives it more weight.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So he says, I have a question regarding my ZFS and virtualization. I'm currently running ESXi VMware server at my house. Here's the specs. I love it when somebody's got an ESXi server. He's got a 3.4 gigahertz i7 processor, 16 gigs of RAM, 6 hard drives, 220 gigabyte drives in a mirror, 500 gigabyte standalone data drive, 2 terabyte Western Digital black, and a 2 terabyte Western Digital green, including a 1.5 terabyte Hitachi. So he's got some drives. He says, I'm thinking about...
Lots of random drives.
I know, yeah. I'm thinking about switching my file server to FreeNAS with a ZFS array, but I'm running everything under ESXi. So I'm not sure how ZFS will like that. What are your thoughts about virtualization? I'm not quite sure I follow his question.
We've talked about it before. But I think he's talking about running FreeNAS on top of ESXi.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before. In general, I'm not a big fan of doing it. There are people that do it, but ZFS much prefers to talk to the real hard drives. So most people set up with ESXi would be a FreeNAS box in the corner with hard drives, and then the ESXi connects over iSCSI, and all the virtual machines live on that instead of living in the ESXi box. But if you only have one box, then you can do it that way. So you can run the FreeNAS as a virtual machine in ESXi, but in general, I don't recommend it, right? ZFS wants to talk to the real hard drives, not to virtualization. And
it's a little more deeper than your average file system. Like, it's doing more stuff, right?
Yeah, and like when it does a sync, or like when it flushes and it says, this data needs to be on the real disk, you want it to be on the real disk, right? And when something's getting in the way, like the virtualizer saying, oh, I'm going to ignore that for performance reasons.
You're kind of negating some of the benefits of ZFS.
Yeah, you can cause problems.
Huh.
In general, it'll probably work, but I don't like to do it that way.
So one question he has, which I've seen a lot, is I've been getting a lot of Drobo versus ZFS questions. In fact, I covered one on last week. And Alan, the question that I kind of danced around was, they asked how hard is it to add mismatched drives, and I said, well, you have your storage pool, and then you would maybe like create a mirror of 2 new drives or a single drive and add it to that pool, but then you could be adding some sort of point of failure if that one drive dies. So is that right? Like if you have...
Right. So in ZFS, it's So you have the pool, and a pool consists of one or more VDEVs, or virtual devices. A VDEV can be a single drive, although that's not recommended.
Okay.
A mirror, which is two or more disks that are identical, or a RAID Z of any kind, right? 1, 2, or 3, or whatever. And then you can have one or more of these VDEVs. So if you create a RAID Z1, which requires 3 or more disks, right, and one of the drives is redundant, when you create a VDEV for RAID Z, you can't change that VDEV. So you can't add another disk to it, but you can add another VDEV. So if you create a RAID Z of of 4 2-terabyte drives, if you want to grow that system, you have to add a new VDEV, either a mirror of 2 drives or another RAID Z or whatever. But saying that, mixing and matching generally isn't great, right? Because ZFS is going to stripe across each VDEV, right? So if you have, a RAID Z1 and then a mirror, they're going to have kind of uneven performance because one VDEV, the mirror is going to be faster at reading and maybe a little slower at writing, and so on.
Yeah. So then are you limited then by the slowest drive?
Not entirely. The algorithm is getting better such that it'll notice, hey, this VDEV isn't working as hard as this one. Let's do more on this one.
Okay.
But a lot of times it can only read the data from where it was written, right? So
yeah.
So yeah, in general, you're limited by the speed of the VDEV, and so ZFS was designed as an enterprise file system. So it was designed for a Sunbox where you just have 48 identical hard drives.
Right. Yeah. And if you treat it like that, you'll get great results.
Yeah. So ZFS originally was designed where it was...
Cost is not really a consideration.
We have enterprise amounts of money. We just need to be able to solve this problem.
Right, exactly. It's one of those things where, like, if you want to add drives, go for it. Probably want to add at least 2 at a time.
Yeah. And so, it's kind of difficult to adjust the pool after. I have some notes written down from when I did the crazy thing of upgrading a Z1 to a Z2 by pushing all the data to certain drives and then pushing it back to a new pool. Mm-hmm. Basically having to back up everything and then restore it, but done kind of differently. Anyway, I'll try to publish that sometime. I got to find time to put it all together into a coherent thing. But yeah, looking at his mix match of drives, it's kind of icky.
Yeah.
Originally, my first ZFS install was a 300 gig, a 320 gig, and 2 1.5 terabyte drives, just striped across, so no redundancy, all the drives, all the space. And it works. But if a drive dies, you're in serious pain.
Yeah.
And also the performance isn't great because more data gets written to the bigger drives, because ZFS's goal is to make all the drives get to 100% full at the same time. So if you have 2 2-terabyte drives and a 500 gig drive, each of the 2 terabyte drives is going to get written to 4 kilobytes for every 1 kilobyte that gets written to the 500 gig, so they fill up at the same time. So when you're reading back, that means you have to read more data from the 2 terabytes because, 4 times as much data is written there.
Yeah.
And so you might not actually be getting all the performance out of the 500 gig drive that you could be. And that's why I rebuilt my array with all similar sized drives.
So it was important enough to you that you went through the trouble.
Yes, well, also I need more room. And I wanted redundancy because
that
those
motivates
300 gig drives, those 300 gig drives were old and we're going to die.
Got to do it anyways.
As far as getting towards the Drobo type features, it's not finished yet, but OpenZFS is working on the ability to remove a device. So, if you created, one of those crazy pools and you had enough free space, you could remove something in order to actually move around things.
That is rather nice.
Yes. But again, that's still kind of designed where because actually you ran into this problem, right? You had a big RAID Z and then you added a 2-disc mirror to the end of it and weren't happy with that. And
well, one of the drives died in that mirror, and I had to remove that mirror from the pool.
And there's no way to actually remove a VDEV from the pool until this new feature comes up.
Yeah, it was kind of wonky, but I managed to make it work. All right, well, Alan F. writes in. He says, hi, friends. While we can admit that ZFS is the best current file system for data storage, how does it work in a distributed file system? Can you have a data center of FreeBSD machines with ZFS and have it be distributed? Is that concept even necessary with Z? He actually wrote out Z. I know Alan hasn't tried it, but could Z, he wrote out Z again. Could Z be used in conjunction with something like Ceph or Swift to distribute the data? As far as I can tell, neither one of these are a file system. Can Z not directly run on GNU/Linux because of license issues, or is it something like a kernel issue? Best, Alan F. So distributed.
There's lots of arguments of whether ZFS on Linux is a violation of anything. Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, that spearheads the ZFS on Linux project, doesn't think it's a problem. And if I recall correctly, Stallman and Linus don't think it's a problem. But some of the really diehard GNU people think it's a problem.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me there is a potential reality where we could just have ZFS baked into the Linux kernel?
Not baked in, no. Okay. I don't think.
Okay, all right, because I was about to flip the table. Know. All right, okay.
But the point of the OpenZFS project is to try to get the Linux version of ZFS to be standardized like the FreeBSD and the Lumos ones.
So what about this whole distributed nature where maybe you have like a bunch of one virtual network-wide file system?
Yeah, I've never used a distributed file system, but ZFS can expose your space as a block device called the ZVOL, VOL. So yes, you can create a block device and give block device on each of 5 ZFS machines and create a distributed file system, or use Swift or AFS or what was the other one you mentioned, SFS or something, or whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah. What was the other one you mentioned? But or NFS.
Yeah,
just do it all over NFS.
And you can expose. I use those ZVOLs for virtualization, right? So whether it's VirtualBox or Beehive, I create a ZVOL and say, "Here, this is the disk image. Instead of a file on the file system, it's a block device."
Yeah, that seems like the practical use right there. That's cool. That's a nice feature, really.
It depends what your goal with the distributed system is. If I think somebody in the chat room, it might have actually been the guy that asked the question, was like, he works in the audio industry. Was it audio or auto? One of the two. Either makes cars or sound. And they have like 800 terabytes of data. Ooh. And so, yes, I understand that might be difficult to put in one machine.
Yeah.
Although, not really. You create a bunch of JBODs and then you get 2 heads and do SCSI multipath, and you can put that in one machine. Or actually, it's 2 machines pretending to be one. But if you need to use or want to use a distributed file system, it is possible to do it with ZFS underneath.
There you go.
Separately, FreeBSD has another feature called HAST, or High Availability Storage technology, that allows you to it's kind of like DRDB, right? Having multiple machines represent the same single block device, so that it's redundant.
Mm-hmm. All right, Alan.
But generally, I just use ZFS replication and have it be asynchronous rather than synchronous.
Good stuff. All right, next one comes in from Phoenix560. He says, hi, Chris and Alan. After hearing about the failed bank job during TechSNAP episode 128, I wanted to give you some insight into how easy it is for me to gain entry into some places here in the UK. So it was 128. We covered that KVM story. He says, although I'm sure it's probably just as easy anywhere else in the world, I'm an environmental consultant, and I deal mainly with dangerous materials such as asbestos. I get to travel to many different locations all over the UK, the ultimate backstage pass, if you will. I get to work on military bases, prisons, sports and entertainment venues, schools, hospitals, etc., and I usually get just free range. I have to tell you that it is scary easy for me to go anywhere and do anything in these places with little confrontation. In fact, the amount of times I have been out of printer ink, put my paperwork on a USB stick, and wandered up to a member of staff of a school or bank and asked them to use their computer to print it, and they happily obliged without questioning or even scanning the drive first. It's almost laughable. When I was once even left alone for several hours in the main server room of a military helicopter production site with my own laptop simply because there's no other desks available for me to work at. He goes on to say, I have an ID badge, a uniform with my company name on it, and I swagger around like I own the place. I'm there by request, and not one person has seen me before, but because they have an issue with a dangerous material and they're all in the state of panic, they seem more than happy to comply with anything that I request and need. I have cleared sensitive premises of all personnel in the past and have been left to walk the building alone. I don't take advantage of my position, but if I were that way, I could do so with relative ease. It's crazy to think that with, as you put it, a clipboard and a uniform, someone could gain access due to people being unable or too shy to ask a question. Keep up the good work, Phoenix 560. This echoes exactly what you and I were talking about in 128.
Well, he mentioned that with you saying, all you need is a clipboard and they'll let you do anything.
Yeah, it really, especially when there's an emergency. But
it just sounds like a movie plot. You know, you go up to some business and come in, it's like, oh, there's asbestos and you're breathing it and it hurts you.
It sounds like an Ocean's 13.
Everybody leave the building. Yes,
Ocean's 14.
Exactly.
Well, it's true. I mean, like I said, you just need a nice jacket, a clipboard, or you know, and it's not even just like IT stuff. Like when I went to PAX a couple of weeks ago, I went with my buddy Chase from Unfilter, and he has a GeekGamer.tv network. And for his crew, we all had the same shirts. And so we all had the same shirts, and we had cameras and microphones, and we literally would walk up to booths, and they would kick people off and we didn't ask them to. But they would kick people, like we went to the Oculus Rift where they had like the 3D virtual reality cool stuff. And like they're like, sorry, sir, we need you to get up. And they took the Oculus Rift away from him so that way we could play with it because we're wearing uniforms and we look official. And it's something about the human psychology. First of all, we're all too polite, so we don't want to challenge. We don't want to say, hey, what are you doing here? Hey, are you supposed to be here? Like, that's probably happened to me twice in 15 years. You know, and it's just, and people exploit that.
The one time it happened to me, the secretaries were too shy to say anything. But after I was upstairs working on the computer, she went and got some other guy to come and challenge me.
That's how it goes every time, man. That's how it went both times it happened to me is the people who noticed didn't say anything, but then they flag the person who's the diehard, like, you know, follows the rules, you know, or the person who's the authority.
Yeah, they would just go and get someone who I might be afraid of or something. It's like,
yes,
like, yes, I'm supposed to be here, and I'm in a hurry, so if you could go away, that'd be good.
Yeah, let me get my work done. All right, Jacob writes in. He's got a question about Ethernet and power. Hi, guys. I'm looking into setting up Ethernet over power, but wondered what experiences you two may have had working with the technology. I'm in a situation now that I cannot physically wire my computer to my router as they are on opposite ends of the house. I have a very shoddy Wi-Fi reception, and I'm looking for something better. And Power over Ethernet claims to get up to 200 megabits now. I found a piece of hardware on Monoprice, so of course I'll be using the Jupiter Broadcasting extension when I buy it. The reviews are pretty mixed, but mostly good. There are a couple of people that say they get worse speeds than their wireless router. I was wondering if you two had any thoughts on maybe any particular security flaws or anything else to note about these types of power and Ethernet devices.
A friend of mine used one because he had computers in his basement, and his room and his computer and his Wi-Fi router and everything were on the second story. And so the Wi-Fi didn't quite reach, because especially this was back in like B days too. So yeah, he used Powerline Ethernet and he would get almost 100 megabits.
Yeah, I mean, I've done this too.
It'll depend on a lot of things, like how noisy your electrical network is and what devices are on the same circuit.
See, for me, that's what it was. And I don't know if this is still a problem, but for me, whenever I had to jump circuits in my breaker box, I would go from like a good connection to couldn't even stream a video, like maybe less than a megabit. And so I ended up, what I did was I got a Wi-Fi access point, used DDWRT, and used WDS to what that lets you
basically
extends
create a
yeah
extension.
And honestly, I know it's Apple and everybody hates Apple, but the Airport Extreme and Airport Express make this so stupid easy, it's unbelievable. You get an Airport Extreme, yeah, you pay a premium. You put that on the device, and then you get an Airport Express, yeah, you pay a premium. And you plug that into Ethernet. So you get as far away from the base station as you can, and you plug it into Ethernet. It will see the first base station over Ethernet. It'll link them up, and it'll extend the wireless network, not by connecting by Wi-Fi, but by actually communicating with the other base station over Ethernet. And I have found that to be a really rock-solid solution. So that might be one option, but you need a Mac to configure it. So it totally sucks in that regard. So DDWRT is another way. I have had, like, I've used the Belkin Powerlines products, and if it's on the same circuit, it worked well. Like, Angie and I used to link our offices that way, and then we had another power over Ethernet over power down in our living room to like stream our media, and that was the one that required a circuit jumper break, and that was the one that, of course, would almost fail every time streaming video. It was like 1 or 2 megabits, maybe tops. It does work, though, in the right conditions. It's probably only gotten better since I used it, because that was
exactly. Like the one I saw was a long time ago, and it would do at least 10 or 20 megabits, and that's all you need to access the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to recommend the Airport Express because it does require the Mac just to configure it, which
when I bought my house, we did all kinds of amazing things to cheat at running the Ethernet cable. I bought a Wirefish at the hardware store for like $12 or whatever, but we just cheated everywhere to get the cable runs done without tearing up any drywall.
Yeah, there's always that route too. I've done things like tucked an Ethernet cord in underneath the floorboard, like little lip there along the carpet.
So what they did to get into the room I'm in here is this wall over here is the kitchen. So they drilled the hole in the back of the cupboards so that nobody can see it.
So you won't even notice.
And it comes through the wall, and it comes into this room, and I got the wire mold along the wall and surface-mounted boxes. But so that one, and then it goes under the cabinets, and it goes down where the electricity came up for the dishwasher. So it goes down that way and gets into the wiring closet that way. For the living room, what we did is we actually cut a hole about a foot square, or foot by a foot, in the ceiling of the basement, and that comes up and drops everything into the living room. And then in the ceiling of the basement, we just put a drywall access hatch. So it's just this plastic door that you can open and get access to the wires, and then close it up, and it looks all clean and nice.
Yeah, that works.
And then for the ones in the back bedrooms, we drilled the hole in the corner in the floor of the closet. So again, no visible damage, and it's just a hole like this in the floor.
That's fine.
In the closet, and then the cables that come out of there are nicely stapled, and then they punch through and install a regular surface, like a regular in-wall box. Well, like a
little box, a port box.
Yeah, they actually have the proper metal housing, and it's got a faceplate.
That's nice.
Actually, the one in the spare bedroom, I've never got around to installing the faceplate. So it's a box with a cable sticking out of it, and I've never installed the faceplate. I have them all in a box. I don't use the spare bedroom for anything except for storage, so I've never installed the Ethernet jack in there.
I got to give it to the chat room. They've mentioned that you can also use the iPad or iPhone to configure the Airport Express now, and there is an Airport utility for Windows, which I think you have Windows. Yeah, I didn't know that. Although it looks like it hasn't been updated since last year, June. So, but hey, if it lets you set up WDS, it might be worth it, because there was a small stretch of time where I was using that a few years ago, and I went to it after having DDWRT kind of poop the bed on me, and I was really impressed with how well it worked. But, my wife had an iMac, so it was pretty easy to set up. That's good stuff. There's a lot of different ways to get around.
I've seen Ethernet over Powerline work before.
Yeah, I've had it work. Like I said, when you're on the same circuit, it's no problem.
I'm spoiled. I have Cat 6A running at a gigabit everywhere in my house.
That's nice.
And all I need to do is upgrade my NICs and my switch, and it can be 10 gigs. So.
Oh yeah, I know.
But the NICs are like $600 a piece still, and
it's funny actually.
Switch is even worse.
It was all of this experimenting with Wi-Fi extenders and power over Ethernet that when we had this place built that I live in now, I was like, no, every room, minimum 2 Ethernet jacks. Some rooms get 4.
Exactly.
It's like that was the experience. Like I'm never doing that again. So here we are saying it works, but both of us when we moved, we're like, I got to get Ethernet.
Yeah.
So take that as it will too. All right, Allan. Well, we got a lot more feedback to get to, but I'm going to save it for a future episode. We'll have even more next week, but you can keep sending.
So we had 2 more little things.
Okay.
I guess we already talked about VBSDCon, but we have the link in the show notes for that.
Yep.
A bunch of great speakers, including Devin Teskey, who was a guest on BSD Now last week, and is also helping me write some patches to the installer for FreeBSD that will hopefully make it in for 10 and be awesome. But the other thing is I had a book recommendation.
Oh, awesome.
As is usual, when I go on a trip to a foreign country and have to spend a lot of time on an airplane, I buy a new audiobook to listen to on my Kindle. I bought Zero Day by Mark Rusinovich.
We've been talking about that.
Oh, you have?
Well, I thought you and I talked about it. Maybe I talked about it with somebody else.
Probably. Because maybe, I don't know. Anyway, so Mark Rusinovich, for those of you who don't remember, is a guy who wrote sysinternals. So I guess, yes, we did talk about this.
Yeah.
So he built all these internal tools for admitting Microsoft before he got hired by them. So he has very intimate knowledge of how he's a security researcher, right? So he actually knows how all this computer security stuff works. So it made the book a lot more entertaining. You know, it's about cyber terrorism, right? The bad guys are making
Cyber terrorism.
Airplanes crash and things like that by hacking the computers and writing zero-day rootkits and stuff. But the realism is there because, you know, all the technobabble is spot on.
It's a sysinternals guy.
Yeah.
And that's legit.
He knows the internals of the Windows operating system.
Yeah.
So he can write, but, you know, it's still fiction and, you know, there's action and running and beating people up. But it was a really good book just because if someone else had tried to write this, all the computer side of it would have just turned me off every time they tried to do any bit of technobabble.
Mm-hmm.
And whereas in this one, it was all perfectly accurate.
Do you want me to play a clip of it?
Sure.
Okay, I'll play a clip of it. Yeah, because, you know, I totally agree with you. The technobabble stuff can be absolutely distracting and pulls you out.
The one I did when I went to Tokyo was the Tom Clancy one. And so they had a couple of references, but they purposely avoided getting into too much detail because they didn't want to have to worry about trying to have it right? Because Tom Clancy's always about having it right. So they didn't get into too much detail, whereas this one, you know, specifically mentions Active Directory and all that stuff.
Okay, here we go. Here's a clip.
Manhattan, New York City, Friday, August 11th, 12:01 a.m. Shh. When the whisper came out of the darkness, the man stopped. A vast panel of glass covered the wall before him, displaying uptown Manhattan in a scene that might have been sold as a poster. Ambient light and the soft glow from a dozen computer monitors was all that spared the room total darkness. The logo of Fisherman, Platt, and Cohen floated on each monitor. In the hallway, the steps faded. A moment later, her fingers touched his arm.
And I'm already being drawn into the story. I'm already being drawn in. I was like, oh, yeah, I was picturing the logo floating on the screensaver.
Yeah, and also starting off with the other stuff, too, made it interesting.
Well, I've...
Your attention right at the beginning. But, yeah, it was really good.
I know we've mentioned it from time before, but both Al and I are big audiobook fans, and they've got a really good Android app now, which includes syncing. So if you have a Kindle or another Android device, it'll sync the play position.
That's my favorite thing, is that I generally buy these from Amazon with the Whisper Sync for Voice, they call it.
Yeah.
So I get the Kindle ebook and the audiobook, and I can read either, and when I switch to the other, it seeks to the right place. So, like, it knows what page I was on.
That's a beautiful thing.
In the text version, and then I start listening to the audiobook. I listen for an hour, and if I go back to the text jumps to the page I was listening to.
Makes you feel like it's 2013.
Yeah, this time I used the audiobook for the entire thing. I didn't even open the text version.
Oh, yeah. You know, so the great thing about the audiobooks, I mean, you guys, we probably don't even have to explain it because people are they like podcasts.
Great on an airplane.
They're great. No, I mean, they're great when you're walking. They're great when you're doing the dishes. They're great when you're working and you just need something in the background. So
yeah, I need to get something a little smaller than my Kindle to listen to them on.
Yeah. Well, you could do it on your phone.
Yeah.
The Audible app's really good.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and it'll sync up with your Kindle, so it'll just you just log in. I'll put a link to Zero Day.
I don't actually own an MP3 player.
Right, yeah. No, the Audible app, so the cool thing about the Audible app is, okay, so one of the things about Audible is when you buy the stuff, you own it forever. Like, even if you cancel your account, you still can re-download all your stuff. And the Audible app is really good. Like, it'll just list your whole library, and you just pick which which book you want it to download, and then it downloads it right to the phone and inside the Audible app. It's no syncing required. Like, you know, it takes care of all of that on the back end. And I'll put a link to it in Zero Day in the show notes. So if you guys want to grab that, and you sign up for Audible, we get a kickback as a commission, but we'd recommend it even without that. I mean, Al and I are big Audible and audiobook fans. So, Zero Day, very nice, by Mark Rusinovich.
I just finished it on Tuesday, and
I think I'll grab that one. You know what? I'm going to grab that one right now because I have a credit available. So grab Zeus.
And I think that is going to turn into a series.
Oh, I love that.
Yep.
Although
with the ending, I'm not sure how that would work, but...
And hold on, let me click the buy button, and...
But it's kind of crazy when you click on the author's name, and it's like, other books by this author's, Windows Internals, Part 1 and Part 2. Windows Sysinternal Administrator's Reference.
There we go. See,
yes, he does have another book here called Trojan Horse.
Because I'm an Audible member, I get that book for free. It's total charge, $0.
Nice.
So I just picked it up. Thanks, Alan. Good recommendation.
He also has a short story called Operation Desolation.
At least it's catchy. All right, well, if you want to get a hold of the TechSNAP program, you can email us, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or pop that contact link, or start a thread in our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv, or you can send us a bit message. We'll have that listed in the show notes, as well as the Jupiter signal.
So the Trojan Horse novel is the sequel to Zero Day.
Really? Already?
It takes place 2 years after the first one.
A sequel already?
What do you mean already? The first book came out a while ago.
All right, so hold on. I got to go get Trojan Horse too, is what you're telling me, if I want the complete collection? All right, Trojan Horse, and this is also by Mark. All right, and add to cart.
And it's apparently takes place 2 years after the first book.
All right, I'm adding that to my cart based on solely your recommendation, Alan. Right there, boom.
I'm bookmarking it right now so I can come back and buy it.
And placing. Hold on, let me click complete purchase and done.
Kindle
and done. There we go.
Done.
Yay! I got 2 new books. That's exciting. All right, Alan. So with that all done, it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. And welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. Now, the Roundup are stories that didn't quite make it on the top of the show, but man, do we still want to talk about them. And some of these links are provided by our subreddit over at links.techsnap.tv. And of course, everything is linked in our show notes. That way you can read up even more if we have piqued your curiosity by covering these stories in the Roundup. Alan, I think the top story for a while, I think this is going to be the top story for about a month in the TechSNAP subreddit. Edward Snowden's email provider defied FBI demands to turn over crypto keys, document showed. Of course, that being Lavabit.
Yep. I think the greatest one was when he finally was forced to hand them over, his crypto keys, he printed them out on paper.
Yeah.
And handed them over.
At 4-point font.
Yeah, well...
4-point font.
Well, you'd have to make it fit. Right? Crypto keys are huge. But in general, it's like almost always you expect courts to want everything on paper. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's often quite difficult because they demand things on paper that just aren't great at being on paper.
Right, yeah. Well, and then the FBI complained that it would be too difficult to reassemble all the characters in one mistake, which of course is perfect. It's so great.
Yes. So it was just great. So they fined him, like $10,000 or something?
I think it was like they were going to charge him $5,000 a day until he handed it over, and that was like a couple of days before.
And so he printed it out, and then they're like, we're going to charge you $10,000 for being a dick.
Yeah, and so then he shut down the service. But the problem was this key was used to encrypt, it sounds like, all of the back-end storage on the Lavabit servers, which is a no-no, right? I mean, that's a no-no. It should be each user has their own unique encryption key. This is what we get on Dropbox's case for. And the problem I have with this is this was Lavabit's bag. It's not like Dropbox where they're a cloud syncing service and, by the way, we encrypt it. It's we encrypt your email and, by the way, we have email. That was Lavabit's bag. So I'm a little disappointed in seeing that, but I extremely respect the Lavabit founder's efforts to fight this. He's continuing to fight it. I contributed $50 to the fund to help support him, and there's links. People can go out there and find him.
Price TX in the chat room says that each user did have their own encryption key, but there was metadata that was under a single global encryption key.
Oh, that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Okay, that makes sense.
The other interesting thing is that Lavabit had gone along with requests for, let us wiretap user X or user Y. And they were, in general, fine with letting somebody wiretap the email.
Right.
But in this particular case, the FBI wanted to take over the back end and spy on everything.
Yeah.
And that's when they refused to
And
do
this
so.
seems to be their new approach now. It's like they're no longer happy with precision strikes. And it also shows me that Edward Snowden was pretty smart. I mean, he was following.
But, Lavabit could have turned over if the government had asked just for Snowden's information,
he probably
or just to wiretap his account, they would have just given it, and Snowden wouldn't have known, and it would have turned out bad for him.
Yeah, very possible.
So
they kind of.
I'm wondering if the only way to trust anything is to do it yourself.
Well, that's kind of been my recent. Yeah.
But depending how you do it, if your box is co-located, they could get physical access and tap it some other way.
Yeah. Now, sometimes, Alan, I'll say things like, here's a graphical, or not well, maybe it is graphical. Here's an email client for DOS, or something crazy
I don't
like
think
that.
I don't think anyone said that in a very long time.
Exactly. Well, the headline, Nanox Micro Windows -NX Lib -FLTK for DOS. Now, that's a headline. That's a title. So, Alan, what possessed you to put a email client for DOS in the roundup? It's awesome.
Somebody linked me to it, and I was just like, "That's insane."
You know, it
Yeah, but apparently it uses the WAT32 library to have TCP/IP. Does OpenSSL. Been tested with Gmail, Yahoo, Outlook, Hotmail, AOL, and a bunch of other.
Well, what's funny is it's a graphical email client for DOS. It's written in C and C++. The GUI is based on FT,
and it uses
FLTK.
the micro Windows and FLTK.
It kind of looks like a few Linux desktop UIs I've seen before. It's actually, I don't know anybody who has DOS that needs to connect it to an Outlook.com account, but you know.
I don't know. But it reminded me, I got my goodie bag from your VSD.
Nice.
And in it, there was something interesting.
Oh, yeah?
On top of, a coffee mug and an ad for a new little embedded router machine.
Oh, cool. That's a cool ad where it's a full picture of the motherboard. That's a good way to speak to me. You're talking my language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice pen.
Is that like a cloth tote bag they gave you?
Yes.
Man, these BSD
And we
conferences
also got a little Playmobil character with the shield.
Lego? Is that a Lego?
No, Playmobil.
Oh, Playmobil. Okay. That's a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's got all the stuff, so it's like Maltese. It's got the shield, like the...
Yep, like your shirt does. And your bag.
But the interesting one was...
A floppy disk. Run FreeBSD in the cloud. What the hell is that?
CloudSigma.com, yeah.
Do you have even a computer you can put that in?
I don't have a floppy.
So what's on it?
Apparently nothing. But in general, it got everybody talking about what is on this disk, right? And who is this company and why do they give us a floppy disk?
I haven't seen a floppy drive in so long. It actually looks like a really nice. Like if you rolled it out, and
nice
look how well designed that is. Look how thin it is.
It's a decent floppy disk, but it apparently is blank.
Oh, okay.
But they just use it to stick their sticker to, and instead of a business card, it was a floppy disk. But it was guerrilla marketing. It kind of actually worked because everybody was talking about it.
Yeah, I'm thinking I want to do that.
Everybody at the conference wanted to know what was on the floppy disk, but no one had a floppy disk drive, right? Because even if you have like a USB external floppy disk drive, you didn't bring it with you to the conference.
To a conference, no.
Exactly, and so it really kind of started a conversation.
That is a great idea for business cards, and maybe people are trying to sell them off now, so maybe they're cheap enough. They'd be as cheap as a high quality stock paper.
This is like a brand new empty one too. Like it's not old. Like I kind of I think I threw them away, but I used to have like a box just of rubbish floppy disks.
We should bring the floppy disk back.
Like random colors and stuff.
I honestly, if you want to store an encryption key or something, maybe a floppy disk is the way to do it.
Not really reliable.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I have a whole box full of...
my drive downstairs, or my tower downstairs has a 2.5-inch hot swap port right in the front. So you can just jam an SSD in there, use it, and then rip it out. Yeah. It's great.
And with USB thumb drives, it's just ridiculous. All right, well...
But yeah, you can imagine a USB thumb drive, or remember like the zip drives?
Yeah, oh dude, I had a bunch.
Something the size of that with like flash memory in it.
Dude, I was the master of the click of death. Are you kidding me? I survived the click of death. I also had an iOmega Jazz drive.
Huh? I remember those.
Hooked up via SCSI, and I had to have a SCSI Terminator and a SCSI ID set.
Hey, my 486 had the external tape drive and the external 1.7 times CD-ROM.
Nice.
And then the Terminator, and then a modem set on top of that. So I had the desktop, and beside it I had a stack of other hardware, right? Because you got the CD-ROM drive, the tape drive, and a 14.4K modem.
Oh yeah. It's funny now with Thunderbolt and USB 3, we're going all back to external boxes again. Like, we brought it all inside and integrated it, and now we're all going back. Yep. Yay. All right. Our next story in the roundup. Lead story on NBC News last night. I saw it in the morning, and my first thought was, crap, I better sell all my Bitcoins. I didn't, thankfully, because the price didn't actually go down as far as I expected. But the Silk Road, the online drug marketplace, as well as other legal services and goods, has been shut down by the feds, and DPR, Dread Pirate Roberts, has been arrested. Now, this is huge because this was a hidden marketplace on the Tor network. So the authorities supposedly were not able to find it through traditional means. And in fact, it turns out the way they busted him was he had used his personal Gmail account in a few places. They were able to connect back to his Silk Road forums. And then once they got his Gmail account, they subpoenaed the information from Google. They got all his Google Plus profile stuff. They got his Gmail account. And they started
tracking. You can see what IP addresses he accesses Gmail from, and then call the ISP, and eventually figure out who he is.
Yep, and then they correlated those same IPs to the VPNs that were connecting to the Silk Road server for administration. He was doing administration of Silk Road from a cafe in San Francisco using a VPN. And they say something like he might have made like $80 million or something like that. I mean, he was making quite a bit of money off of it. Huge, though. I mean, Silk Road...
Well, the thing I heard is that part of the reason he actually got arrested was he was plotting to murder one of his employees or something. It sounded really fishy and made up.
So, in the original arrest, they found evidence that he was orchestrating the murder of somebody in Canada. But when they contacted Canadian authorities, they never had any record of a murder. They never had a record of any missing person or even that person. So they couldn't charge him on that. However, there is another murder... There's a first one, actually, before that Canadian one, that the authorities actually posed as the hitman and took staged photos of torturing the person and killing the person and sent them to DPR and saying, look, the job's done. And DPR paid them $40,000 as a holder and then as a retainer and then $40,000 as a finishing the job. I think in Bitcoin. I'm not sure. And
so who did he want them to kill?
It was like one of his lieutenants or an office person who had access to, basically, the way the Silk Road system worked on the back end is if you had administrative level access, you had access to all of the messaging, you had access to all of the listings, you had access to a lot of stuff. And so this guy was sent out to go get some drugs during that, which was a sting operation. The authorities grabbed this administrator and then flipped him, and then DPR put out the hit to get him killed when he discovered he'd been arrested. When he put out the hit, the hitmen that he hired were the feds. And so they were, at that point...
Amateurs.
I know, right? So, and they'd actually started tracking him in 2011 based on like some forum postings that he'd made kind of advertising Silk Road. He wasn't...
Well, remember when Bitcoin first kind of became a thing and Silk Road came out, the authorities were all over it. So if you didn't think they were following it as closely as they could, then you were deluding yourself.
You know, what's funny is you could actually boil it down to like 3 mistakes that he made. And you got to imagine, he probably made 1 million right decisions, and then he made 3 wrong decisions. One of them was he posted on Stack Overflow asking a question about curl and PHP. And he did it under a username that he used on the Silk Road forums. And the other
he created that connection to his regular Gmail account. Yep.
Exactly. And then the other problem was he was using Gmail, right? And once they figure out you're on Gmail, they just... Sergey, could we have access to everything on your server, please? And, of course, Google bends over, spreads their cheeks, and says, have at it, FBI, because we love giving you information on our servers. And they got everything in his account. They're able to tie a bunch of stuff together. It's interesting. It's obviously not going to be the last. A couple of things, though.
It was interesting to see that the Bitcoin price didn't drop too much, which is good because, Silk Road should have no effect on Bitcoin as long as the entire point you have Bitcoins isn't to buy drugs.
Well, I mean, you look at the volume that they were doing, it's like 12% of the Bitcoin volume was like through Silk Road. So I could see some impact there, but I look at it as I think it's a couple of things they talked about. One thing we don't know is how so one of the things they did is they imaged his servers, and then they allowed them to keep running. And when they imaged his servers, they were able to just dig through all of his PMs from Silk Road on the server. So maybe there wasn't encryption on the back end there. We don't know how the FBI found his servers, if they took advantage of maybe that botnet that we heard the FBI had on Tor, or if they did, or if it was just by monitoring his internet connection and seeing what IPs he was connecting to or something. We don't know how they found Silk Road servers, but it doesn't actually seem to be a vulnerability in Tor that they exploited. That's one thing. The second thing that seems to have worked is the Bitcoin tumbler that Silk Road used. In the report, the FBI said that it essentially made Bitcoin transactions that were used on Silk Road untrackable because the tumbler was effective. So a couple of things that stand out is it might be the technology worked. Tor worked, Bitcoin tumbling worked, hidden services worked, but human error led to the downfall.
If you're gonna try to pretend to be 2 different people on the internet, you need to make sure you don't actually cross the line.
And he did it for a really long time. It's just he made a couple of mistakes over time. And from a period of 2011 to 2013, he made a few mistakes. And that's all it took.
Yep.
Yeah, so there you go. There's been a lot of interesting analysis on the Bitcoin subreddit about this, of course, because they're following this pretty closely. All right, our next story in the roundup. Internet of Things demands a new social contract to protect privacy. Now, the Internet of Things, and when I think of that, I think of like things that talk to each other, right? Things that automatically communicate and network.
Or just anything in general, really.
Anything that's kind of monitoring and sending back to a cloud service, I agree. I mean, we're really at a point now, I talked about this on Linux Unplugged this week, where guys like you and I, who can have a pretty good technical understanding if we're given the right information of how something works, cloud services remove that option for you and I and our audience. Like, when we elect to use Dropbox, we really have no idea how that's being implemented, what technology they're using. We get vague ideas over the years based on stories that come out, but we don't actually know. And I think there needs to be a whole new level of disclaimers, privacy protections, and all of that stuff. Did you have any specific thoughts on this roundup one?
Not in particular. It's mostly that, yes, if we want the Internet of Things to keep working the way we want it to, we need to go back to having rules being like, you know, you're not going to unreasonably spy on people for no reason.
Well, especially with the NSA revelations, right?
Yeah.
Next story in the roundup, bypassing U.S. GPS limits for active guided rockets.
Yes.
That's not how I expected that sentence to end.
Yeah. So in this one, they were using GPS system, which is supposed to be limited accuracy unless you're
military.
You're the U.S. military.
Yeah.
And they bypassed the limit so they could get more accurate GPS data so they could guide their rockets.
I want to bypass that limit. I want more accurate data. Can I get an app for that?
Yeah.
It looks like a hardware
but the interesting
fix.
thing is that, you know, it means that not just, that basically anybody could do this.
Yeah, good point. It is interesting, too. Like, we all now have, like, cell phones with at least assisted GPS built into them. And I never even think about the fact that that GPS system could actually be even more accurate. I wonder if at some point they're going to flip that switch and allow us average consumers to have better accuracy with our GPS. Because right now, the industry
especially they kind of have the ability to jam it now if they really want.
Yeah, right. Good point. So they could shut it down. Plus, it forces the industry into Wi-Fi snooping and cellular tower triangulation along with GPS. And if they just had accurate GPS, it would solve a lot of problems.
Well, remember, the GPS is receive only. So your phone would know where it is, but unless it's using assisted GPS or Wi-Fi or somehow telling the authorities don't know where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, right, right. It's
and
receive
so
only.
if you could build a cell phone that you could trust not to give your information away.
Speaking of crap, the U.S. infrastructure threatens the cloud because it's crap.
Yeah, well, like we've talked about this before. You know, if we're going to use a service like Dropbox or own cloud or whatever, in order for that to be very useful, you need internet that's fast enough for you to push and pull stuff from the internet in real time.
You must struggle with this as somebody who runs a content distribution network, right? You have people out there that say, well, my video's choppy, I'm getting lag. And it's like, well, it's not me, it's your crappy connection.
I had this problem. One customer is doing a 720p. He's working on transcoding. So he's got a 720p, a 480p, and a 360p video stream.
Yeah.
And he's trying to test the bitrate switching and stuff. And he's like, when I try to run the 720p on my computer and the 480p on my cell phone at the same time, it always breaks.
Like, are they on the same network?
Yeah. Well, I'm like, how fast is your internet? He's like, I have 3 megabits. Like, so the 720p is 2 megabits of video plus audio.
Yeah.
And the 480p is 1 megabit of video plus the audio.
Yeah.
I think the actual stream with the overhead and everything, the actual stream of the 480p is 1297 kilobits. So yeah, he's like going over his 3 megabits by like 15%. So his connection is completely saturated and they can't keep up and it breaks. It's like, well, yeah, there's your problem. You don't have enough internet. It's like I had the same problem a couple of years ago. A customer, the average user, basically the lowest common denominator they had was 3 megabits. For all the users had at least 3 megabits. So that's what they encoded all their video at, 3 megabits. Mm-hmm. But that was the average bit rate.
Right.
So if there was a fast scene change, it would cause buffering because they could,
It would spike the bit rate.
Yeah, the bit rate was spiked to like 15 megabits, and they couldn't keep up. So we had to build this player that would buffer like 5 minutes ahead, like Netflix does. So that, even when they ran into that, it would just eat into that buffer a lot and then fill it up again. Mm-hmm. But you can't do that just by itself because, like in Flash, if you set a buffer of 5 minutes, you have to wait until it's downloaded 5 minutes of video before it'll even start. So we made this buffer switching system where it would like buffer 3 seconds. Then once it was playing, it would balloon the buffer to 5 minutes. And if it ever ran out of buffer and had to like pause the video and start buffering, then it would switch the buffer back to only 3 seconds. And then once it started playing again, and back to 5 minutes.
Clever.
Yes, but we also had to be like, you have to re-encode your video back down to barely 2 megabits plus audio, so it comes out to less than 2.5 megabits.
Kind of a wonky workaround. But
yeah, because but if you want to stream video in like even Netflix, they're like most people, their broadband survey found that most people couldn't stream 2 megabits consistently.
Oh. Yeah, it's like
right?
people will be like, yeah. I mean, people in the chat room sometimes when they're having problems with the stream, like, well, whatever, I have a 10 megabit connection, but it doesn't really sustain that.
Exactly, and it's like I'm spoiled. I have 100 megabit, and I get 100 megabit all the time.
Yeah.
Like when I download off my server in Toronto, I max it out. But even it was nice to be able to go to download PCBSD the other day and get 5 megabits a second.
Right.
And then I realized why I was getting good speeds all of a sudden.
Because your connection's good?
No, because the site I was downloading from uses this CDN. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Well, that helps.
I didn't make the connection at first until I was like, oh, look, it's actually going.
Look at my CDN
And I was like,
go.
I know that. That's
what all that hard work was for.
Yeah. But also just, other things. Steam actually downloading quickly.
Yeah,
nice.
for sure. Yeah.
But then you use something like the one for Star Wars, and it's slow, and it's like, damn it, EA.
Yeah.
Get a better CDN.
No kidding. Well, let's talk about the former NSA honcho who says enterprise security is appalling.
Yes, so this is the CTO, the former CTO of the NSA, and he says that enterprise IT security is a joke, which is what we've been saying for a couple of years now.
Look at this. This is the new
and
Flash
it's actually what the book Zero Day is actually kind of about.
So, I mean, enterprise security is just riddled with problems. I mean, corporate problems, bureaucracy problems, legacy support problems. I mean, of course it's horrible, right? I mean, this doesn't surprise anybody. I guess what that actually translates to is all of the companies we rely on for our services, insurance, medical, et cetera, they're enterprises. They have these problems. So that's the real-world impact of it, but it doesn't surprise me too much. Now, not too often, Alan, we have a PDF linked in the roundup. What's this one?
It's a research paper.
Signals from the crowd.
Uncovering social relationships through smartphone probes. So basically, they found that if you set up a fake Wi-Fi point around a big event, you can find from the MAC addresses you can see the manufacturer of the different phones. And then by looking at, what percentage of people have iPhones versus Androids or Blackberries or whatever, you can make some conclusions about the type of people that might be at this event. Whether that's a party or a protest, right? For the government, it might be interesting to know how many hipsters versus, hardcore people are at a certain event. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I would have been interested to see of the cell phones at the BSD conference, what percent of them were iPhones versus Android versus something else.
Did you see many Macs?
Fewer Macs than in the past. A lot of Lenovo's, but also still lots of Macs.
I've always been surprised how many Macs they see at the Linux conferences. So I wondered if it was the same at the BSD one.
Mostly, yes.
That's interesting. Just kind of just by looking at the Mac.
To see like people like Adrian Chad, who's one of the big Wi-Fi hackers, like writes all the drivers and stuff. It's like when he comes to the conferences, he comes with like this bag full of bubble wrapped electronics.
It probably doesn't look suspicious at all to airport security.
Yeah. So anyway, in addition to that, now they have a lot of phones give off this preferred, this thing where they say which Wi-Fi access points they're looking for.
Oh.
And then by correlating, most of the people in this group have in common these certain SSIDs or whatever, right? From the Wi-Fi points they've connected to before. You'd be like, oh, look, almost all these people go to Starbucks. They're probably hipsters. Or, a bunch of these people all have the Wi-Fi access point we happen to know belongs to the university, so they're students. Or,
Right.
they all have, this other one.
You could, if you had a bunch of if you had a bunch, you could know like maybe a lot of people from a certain company were at a protest or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or a party or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what this paper is about, the different things they can learn about a group of people just by looking at what their phone's telling everybody around.
I mean, at least at every stat I'm looking at, the iPhone totally dominates. Like, seems to be the hipsters are going to these events.
Well, and part of it is that, with Android, the MAC addresses are going to be spread across all kinds of different manufacturers.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, in fact, Samsung would be the number 2 in this list I'm looking at. Yeah, which makes sense. Samsung, but it's a huge margin of difference, like, huge. Like, the iPhone is almost at 104,000, and the next second close competitor is Samsung at below 36,000.
But it depends on what sample they're using it from, right?
True, yeah. I guess it's like, here's one where RIM actually is ahead. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly.
so if you go to a business meeting. All right, good stuff. Well, you guys can go check out that PDF. It's pretty interesting.
So you could get all kinds of different conclusions from that, including, what type of people are at a rally or a protest, or what kind of people are over here, or, if you're looking to rob a place, what kind of people,
What kind
how
of
likely
gear
are they
they
to have
got.
a lot of money?
Yeah.
Stolen BlackBerries aren't worth very much, but people who have BlackBerries probably have more money in their wallet.
Oh! Yeah, because they haven't bought a phone for the last 5 years.
Yeah. Right. And so on and so on.
All right. Well, security after the death of trust in a post-Snowden world, Alan.
Yes.
Security has to be rebooted.
Just, an O'Reilly post about that, and it's kind of interesting what their ideas are.
Where big data collection is voluntary, I do not volunteer. Thus, I do not use Facebook, Google, etc. When collection is involuntary, like with the NSA's big data, I work to limit their power, both in to collect and use. It's a good read, actually.
Yep.
All right, this might help inform some of my thought processes I've currently been sort of mulling through. All right, our last story in the roundup, I believe. What is your email security worth? $12.50, maybe, according to Yahoo.
So this is Yahoo doing the bug bounty wrong.
12 and
So
12.
they have a bug bounty program, and somebody reported a cross-site scripting vulnerability that will allow someone to hijack your Yahoo Mail session if you were logged into Yahoo Mail and got this malicious iframe to run.
Yeah,
then
okay. So
they
like it
would
came
be
in an
able to
email?
take over. If you'd logged into your email and in this browsing session and then went to this malicious website, they could get into your email.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Yeah. So they reported this, and Yahoo fixed it or whatever. But instead of like Google giving you like 10 grand or something, they're like, here's a coupon for $12.50 off whatever item you would like to buy from the Yahoo corporate store.
Oh, my
There's
God.
T-shirts and handbags.
Are they joking? Do they not realize these people can go make thousands of dollars selling this crap on the black market?
Yeah. So Yahoo is revamping their bug bounty program. No more T-shirts. But
Well, I still want a shirt.
yeah.
I mean, let's not get crazy.
Well, because back before there were bug bounty programs, a lot of times you would just get a shirt.
Get a shirt,
Right?
yep.
They would just mail you a shirt, and that was at that time it was a trophy. It was worth a lot, not monetarily, but intellectually, and like you know,
It was like, look
especially
what-
when they were the kind of when not just anybody could get a Yahoo corporate T-shirt.
Yeah, no, I could see that. Unfortunately, we now have this horrendous black market out there.
Yeah.
Which makes all of the stakes in this much higher because there's a for-profit industry. An industry, like not like kids on tour using bitcoins to sell vulnerabilities. But that happens too. But we're talking like full-fledged. They have offices and staff, and they have people who interface with government to sell this. I mean, it's full-fledged industry now. So $12.50 does seem a little antiquated in this new world. Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. So you guys can go read more about all of these stories, anything we've covered in the show, actually, in the show notes, including a book to that audiobook, a link to that audiobook that we talked about. And
We are crazy.
because we are crazy. All right, Alan. Well, is there anything else we want to touch on before we run?
No.
Nope.
I think
Other than
so.
just tell people to go watch BSD Now episode 5, which will be out soon. With,
yes, and to make sure you come to VBSDCon and meet me in person. Oh,
you're
great
going?
story!
You're going? You are crazy. You are going
yes.
all the time.
Well, it's not until the end of this month.
Dude, you travel so much more than I do that I'm in awe of you. I'm like, wow.
Well, the crazy thing is I'm pretty sure I'm going to the FreeBSD 20th anniversary party, which is the weekend after VBSDCon in California.
Dang. Well, so there you go. So more reason to go to VBSDCon. So remember, you can go to vbsdcon.com.
Right, and register and hurry up and do it.
Yeah.
But yes, also at EuroBSDCon, I've encountered 4 people wearing TechSNAP t-shirts.
Nice, dude. The 100 shirt?
Yep. Dan Lingill, who's the guy that I personally bought and gave him a t-shirt because he had watched all the episodes and he ran the Canadian conference. He wore his shirt during his talk. So when the YouTube video of that comes out next month, you'll be able to actually see him wearing my shirt again.
Epic.
But there were 2 other people who were wearing the shirts at the conference on different days. And then a 4th guy had me autograph his shirt.
We need a new shirt. We got to get more shirts out there. That's too awesome. That's great. All right, so VBSDCon, October 25th through the 27th, vbsdcon.com.
Yes. Chris and I will both be there. Also, there's a bunch of other speakers, including Devin Teskey. If you want to get your picture taken with that epic beard, you should definitely come.
Can I pose with your beard? Excuse me.
Yes.
I would do it, too. When I saw that beard, I was like, I could do that. I could pull that off. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. We'll see. All right. Well, you can also email the show, TechSNAP at Jupiter Broadcasting. What?
Devin Teskey is crazy, though. He writes like 22 different programming languages.
Yeah.
But so he built this API with BSD config, right? And so I'm helping him write this patch, and so it's all in shell script, right? But he has like structs, like C style.
The most beautiful shell script you've ever seen.
He's like implementing C concepts in shell script.
That's a man who's comfortable with his shell, but he just wants a little more power. That's all.
Well, because he also writes Forth and all these exotic programming languages on top of C and everything else. But just he can do amazing stuff. This is like the first patch I wrote was hideous. I had just copied and pasted bits of dialogue commands from the other shell scripts and basically got enough of it that it would do what I wanted it to do.
Yeah, when's there going to be a good BSD conference in Washington?
I don't know about that. There isn't one in California. There's just a one-night party for the 20th anniversary. It's not a conference. And that's November the 2nd, I believe. Yes, I'm pretty sure it's November the 2nd.
Washington's
and
great.
that's put on by IX Systems, and that's going to be at the DNA Lounge in San Francisco.
You just maybe make a mention to somebody. Hey, Washington, it's a nice-looking state.
Yeah, well, if somebody wants to run a conference, then hard to do.
There's always that.
Yeah.
All right, Alan.
And the European one moves around every year. Next year's EuroBSDCon will be in Bulgaria.
Are you going to go?
Yep.
You crazy. You crazy. One of these days, I'm going to go to one of these. You just watch, Alan. I'm going to surprise you. Like, yeah, I'm going. I bought tickets. You'll be like, what? Did you know it's BSD?
So, upcoming ones, there's VBSDCon, then there's the 20th anniversary in California. If I can keep the schedule correct in my head, the next one after that will be New York BSDCon in February.
Oh, man.
And then the Asia one in Tokyo will be in March.
Oh, man.
And then the one in Ottawa will be in May.
I'd love to go to New York
Bulgaria
or Tokyo.
Will be, and then the European one will be in Bulgaria in September.
You guys should do, if you got cruises, telling you, BSD cruise. The Mac users do this crap all the time, and I'm always thinking the Linux guys need to do this, the BSD. A cruise, man. If you have a conference on a cruise.
Satellite internet
is
just,
That would suck.
It was the Wi-Fi setup for this conference was insane. They like brought in a dedicated 100 megabits just for the conference.
Right on.
And they had like separated 2.4 and 5 gigahertz networks.
Nice.
So that if you had an end device, you could jump in the separate network and avoid all the crowding on the G network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very nice.
People had a couple of problems on and off, but in general, I found it quite good. Plus, the hotel had free Wi-Fi in the lobby as well.
Okay, you got me. You're right. The cruise would suck for internet connectivity. Maybe I could use that as like de-purging time. I don't think I've been disconnected from the internet, well, since the internet was a thing. I could probably use a couple of days.
I've gone camping for a weekend once or twice, but then that's usually...
I don't think I've done that even. I mean, it's bad. It's bad.
But, when I went to Malta, I was still connected to the internet and used it for a bunch of things, like Twitter to find where people were and stuff, but I purposely ignored all my business email.
Nice. Good for you. That's good. It makes it a little more vacation.
Just made it more to catch up on when I got home.
It does do that. Yeah. Well, speaking of which, we should probably go. We should probably run. This brings us to the end of this week's episode.
Yes. We kind of rambled on at the end there.
Well, it's all right. You like the conferences, and it makes me want to go, too. So we'd love to hear from you. Email us, TechSNAP@JupiterBroadcasting.com, or pop our contact link. Or even better, join us live Thursdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, which is
4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UCC.
Pow, over jblive.tv or jblive.info for the audio edition. Alan, have a great week. We'll see you right back here next Thursday, okay?
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning this week's episode of TechSNAP. We'll see you right back here next week.